Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello, Miss Vega. Hey, Jonathan.
Hi, Angela. How are you?
Hello.
How are you?
I am here. Doing well, thank you.
Well, you're looking very
I'm
spiffy.
trying. You know, it's never a dull moment over here. How you doing, Jonathan? Hi, Nicole.
Same,
Good
never
morning.
here either.
Good morning.
All right, we'll give it a few minutes to let folks trickle in. Good morning, Lloyd.
Good morning, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thursday.
Good morning, Lord.
Morning.
Good morning.
All right, we just need one more subcommittee member and then we will have quorum. All right, good morning, everybody. Even though we don't have quorum, I'm going to go ahead and get started because time is precious. We now have quorum. Okay, good morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan Crooms, the chair of the Performance Management Subcommittee. Welcome to the September meeting. We have a couple of folks with us who have not joined us before, so I would love to have them introduce themselves. Let's start with Vega, who's one of our HSAC members. If you just want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Happy Friday Eve, everyone. Again, I'm Vega Swepson. I'm on the HSAC committee. I've been on there for a few minutes now. I am an instructor and a resource specialist at Durham Technical Community College. So I'm excited to be a part I was able to move some things out of the way and finally do something that I wanted to do, which was to be a part of this group. Thank
Okay,
you.
wonderful. So sounds like you're ready to join us on a more permanent basis.
Yes, sir.
I could not be more excited. All right. And then we also have Elliot Rhodes. And Mr. Rhodes, I have not met you before, so welcome. And if you would introduce yourself and tell us what brings you to the meeting today.
Hi, I'm with the data center at the North Carolina Coalition to End Homelessness. So I'm just attending here with Daisha, observing.
Oh, terrific. Wonderful. Well, welcome, and we're glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So first up is in our agenda is the public comment period. Does anybody wish to make a public comment? And certainly the public or members of the committee are more than welcome to make a public comment.
I just have a question about the calendar invite.
Sure.
Is the calendar invite making everybody register and then join? Is that the right one? I mean, obviously I got in, but should it be making everybody register before you join? Every time?
Good question. I believe that I have to register every time.
Okay.
I also register for a lot of meetings. Melissa, I believe that comes out from one of your email addresses. Is there a chance you might be able to answer Shantae's question?
Yeah, so this comes from the community development email. But the reason why it's asking you to register again is because if you're using the registration link that's in the original invitation to join every time, it's going to ask you to re-register every time. But if once you register once, you should get a confirmation email that has the link for you to join all of the meetings. So what I've done for myself after I register is that I add that invitation, because the invitation that comes in the confirmation email, to my calendar, and then I will never have to register again. I just join directly from that link that's in the confirmation email for all future meetings.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question is, do we still need a secretary?
We do. In fact, one of the items is committee leadership needs. So it kind of sounds like you might be volunteering.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, as soon as we get to that item, I will bring that up, and I am thrilled that you are volunteering.
Thank you.
Okay, so first up after that is our review of the August meeting's minutes. I have attached those. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look at them. And Lloyd, I'm sorry, I missed your hand. I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. Good morning, everyone. I just Lloyd Schmeider with Community Development. Just wanted to mention that I've copied and pasted the agenda for this morning's meeting in the chat for anybody who wants to review it there. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Lloyd. I really appreciate that. Yeah, if everybody wants to take a few moments to take a look and see if there's any changes that need to be made to the minutes. If everybody feels they're okay, if there's no changes, certainly happy to entertain a motion to approve them. If we need more time, happy to also set aside more time so that you all can look at them.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes as stated. This is Angela Holmes.
We have a motion to approve the minutes from Angela Holmes. Do we have a second?
I'll second. This is Tracy.
Okay. So we have a second from Tracy. Any other edits or discussion on the minutes? All right. Committee members, if you all will vote in the chat. All right, minutes approved. Okay, next agenda item, committee leadership needs. So we are definitely in need of a secretary, which Shante, it sounds like you are willing to serve as. And if you're willing to,
Correct.
oh, go ahead.
No, I said correct. Mhm.
Okay, terrific. The other thing too is that I've been chairing this committee for the past couple of years. It would be, I think, good to be setting things up for another chair to eventually take over. My own view on leadership is it's not something to be held on; it's to be shared, and committees need changes from time to time. My schedule has also increasingly made it so that I may not be able to be at every meeting, so I will need some help from time to time to chair these meetings. And I can tell you for definitely that come November's meeting, which is on, I believe, the 9th, I will not be able to be to chair the meeting. So if we do, so we have a secretary here, Shante. You can certainly chair that in my place. But I'm also bringing this up because we do need to think about leadership for this committee for the long run. So if there is anybody else who is interested in being chair in the immediate future, please do let me know.
Good morning, Jonathan. I know you reached out to me and I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to follow back up with you. I'm sorry, I'm working from home today. I'm not sure if I'm quite camera ready, but I'll go ahead and turn my camera. Alliance covers 6 counties. And so right now I'm a little short staffed. I'm in the midst of recruiting and just all the projects and things in which I'm responsible for. I'm willing to help out when necessary, possibly co-chair with someone, but I cannot commit to fully chair the committee. I think the work that we do on this committee is really important to the overall work of the HSAC. However, at this time, I wouldn't be able to fully say I could chair it. I could assist with someone if someone else was willing to co-chair or co-chair with you if you decide to stay on.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I forgot to mention is that if there is anybody who is interested in becoming chair, even when I'm eventually not chair, whenever that is, I plan to be involved heavily in the committee, and I can certainly help guide and support along the way. So I would, certainly at a minimum, welcome. Well, I don't know that, I don't know if we can necessarily co-chair. I don't know if that's permissible in the governance charter, but I'm certainly open to that. I may have to ask that with ask our team here if that's permissible. Look in the governance document, but I absolutely am. If permissible, I would be delighted to have a co-chair with me, just because it makes things a little bit easier. So let me get back to you on that, and I appreciate, Tracy, you taking the time to tell me. After this meeting, Shante, I will follow up with you if you would like, just to kind of give you some idea, some guidance on how to become, what you have to do as secretary. Mainly what it involves is taking the minutes and, getting them back to me as the chair to send out for the next meeting, that kind of thing. Do you have any questions at this point?
No, but I would be happy to follow up with you after the meeting, so that we can set aside a time to discuss that.
Okay,
I
terrific.
appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the help. All right, moving along to the next item. So we're going to have Melissa do another presentation, give us an update on the data collection. She was able to get some data from our from our permanent supportive housing projects. So she's got some new data for to present to us from our last meeting. So we're basically picking up on the data collection that had just finished up. So Melissa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Let me go ahead and share my screen. All right, can you all see this? I'm gonna make it bigger.
Yep, I can see it.
All right, is that big enough? I know last time I think I had it too small at the beginning. All right, so this is just a continuation of the last presentation I gave on performance reporting. I did not go over our permanent supportive housing projects, and we did receive data from Alliance Health and Housing for New Hope on some of our permanent supportive housing projects. And there are 5 measures that we're looking at when it comes to our permanent supportive housing projects. And the first one is permanent housing stability. Now the benchmark for this measure is 95%. So our Alliance Health project was performing at a 97% for this measure, which is above that benchmark, which is really good. Our 2 of our Housing for New Hope projects met the benchmark at 95%, but we did have 2 other projects that were under the benchmark at 88 and 85% respectively. For measure 2, now for permanent supportive housing, we have 2 income-based measures. So the first one for measure 2 is for total income increased or maintained. So this includes all sources of income that are increased and maintained for different households. So the benchmark for this measure is 75%. As a system, considering these 5 projects that we have data from, we were performing at a 65%, which is below the benchmark. And we saw that all 5 of the projects that we received data from were under that benchmark. So when we're done with this, we can have a little bit discussion of what that means, and maybe if we have anyone on our call who has worked within these projects, if they want to provide feedback at the end, maybe we can discuss that as well. For employment income, measure 3, we're looking at specifically earned income from employment from these clients that are enrolled in these projects. Alliance Health's project for permanent supportive housing was the only one that met the benchmark. So the benchmark of 20%, Alliance Health hit 32% for earned employment income increased or maintained, while the other 4 projects were well below what the benchmark shows. So we had 2 of our Housing for New Hope projects perform at 6% and the other 2 at 0%. So again, we can have a little bit of discussion of what this means, and if we have anyone on the call who can provide feedback for what they're noticing within these projects, maybe we can discuss that at the end as well. For mainstream benefits, the benchmark is 60%, and we saw that almost all of our projects hit that benchmark, with the exception of the Housing for New Hope Andover permanent supportive housing project. The rest were well above the benchmark of 60% for mainstream benefits. For measure 5, which is looking at health insurance coverage and making sure that our clients are covered or that they increase their health insurance coverage while they were enrolled in the project, all 5 of the projects that we received data from hit that benchmark well above it, which was really good to see. Our benchmark was 60% of clients, and we saw, I think the lowest project was the Andover, and it was at 75%, which is above that benchmark, which is really good to see as well. So in terms of our permanent supportive housing projects, these are the projects that we have data from. So that's all that I have to report on permanent supportive housing. But I did want to open it up to conversation, because I know last time we did get a little bit of conversation going around emergency shelter and some of the trends that we were seeing. that were leading to some of the difficulty in finding placement for different clients. So if we have anyone on the call who worked within the Housing for New Hope projects, if you guys want to comment or let us know some trends that you're seeing, I think that could give some really good context to the data.
Thank you, Melissa. I know we have representatives on our committee of both projects. Does anybody have any questions or comments they wish to make?
This is Tracy. Thanks, Melissa, for sharing this information. I think I'm going to continue to kind of bring up just the complexity around the individuals that we serve along the housing continuum. Oftentimes there is a lot of discussion and prep work around housing readiness, but also connecting individuals to mainstream benefits. It does take a while. Oftentimes with the disability being documented and the SSA's process, it could take up to a year sometimes to have someone be found or deemed eligible for those benefits. But also we work with individuals in terms of once they're stabilized in their housing to also think about other ways in which they can gain employment to increase their household income. And oftentimes some of those barriers around, excuse me, some of those barriers are surrounding literacy, whether that's being able to read at a certain level or just computer literacy. And oftentimes it's also struggling to overcome some of the health and mental health and behavioral health concerns that really contributed to their overall homelessness or chronic homelessness for that matter. And so connecting individuals to service providers is still our goal once they're stabilized in their housing, but it continues to be, it's not a battle, but it definitely is challenging once individuals are in housing to not only stabilize them, but also increase household income and connect them with benefits and their willingness to do that. So a lot of motivational interviewing strategies are utilized to kind of help them in that process. It's not an overnight process, but it definitely is a process in terms of helping someone to be successful in their overall tenancy.
I would have to echo that sentiment. I know for Housing for New Hope, particularly with the Andover and Williams Square projects, we have had some very serious staffing challenges, and that capturing the ability to capture some of this information has been a little bit more challenging because of those staffing issues. We don't have a stable case manager. We're currently hiring for a case manager for our Williams Square Andover properties. We're having a lot of turnover in our properties as we speak with the residents. And we also are looking for a peer support specialist for our Streets to Home project because we only have one case manager for that. So with the high level of needs of Streets to Home clients, Andover, Williams Square, not having that staff support has been pretty detrimental to, the way we are working with clients. I will say that Streets to Home typically does a fairly good job at it, but I think with the peer support, some of the income challenges will definitely increase. And then once we start stabilizing with Williams Square and Andover, I'm sure the way we capture our data will increase significantly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The feedback and understanding what, some of the challenges. And also Tracy, I empathize. I understand that, it's very complex situation dealing with different clients who are coming from different backgrounds and have different challenges that may present barriers to some of these items. So I appreciate hearing that as well. I did also want to bring to the committee, our CDD staff had a conversation about the metric that we're using to measure system performance. Right now, what I've been doing is I've been basing it off of, the data from the projects that we've received data from. And I think I had a conversation with Lloyd, and then we extended the conversation to the rest of our homeless team staff to talk about if rather than just doing the system performance data on the projects that have submitted data, if instead it would be a better idea if I pulled like an APR that was separate and it was a culmination of all of our projects. And I could pull that directly from HMIS just so that when we're looking at the system number, it's more representative of our actual system for in terms of like the projects that we have, the total number of projects. Because right now I think that we've been struggling with the issue of like some of our providers haven't been submitting their data. So I just worry that if we're only basing it off of the ones that we have received data from, then it's not necessarily accurate system reporting for that project type. Because there are projects that are missing. If I do it this way, where I'm only analyzing the data of the projects that data was submitted for. So I did want to have some discussion around that, if there are any thoughts or concerns about me doing it differently, where I would just pull the APR separately for all of the projects.
Tracy's got her hand up, so Tracy, you go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to ask a clarifying question, Melissa. Are the benchmarks, just remind me, are the benchmarks in which the COC kind of developed and indicate in terms of a measure of success or room for improvement, or is this something the benchmarks were kind of given to us in terms of HUD's standards of sort of a way to measure our overall efficiency as a COC?
Thank you for that question, Tracy. So the system benchmarks that we have set, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jonathan or Lloyd, but I believe that our benchmarks are currently set and were approved by this committee at a previous meeting. I can't remember the meeting, but I know it was like over about a year ago now that the benchmarks were approved. So I think we've discussed, like, if there are adjustments that need to be made, like that's something that this committee could discuss and approve. If there are adjustments or maybe additional measures that you guys wanted to look into, that is something that this committee would be able to discuss and approve in the future. Unless Jonathan or Lloyd, if you have any additional comments on that.
Yes, so these benchmarks were reviewed and discussed and voted on by this committee. The timeline is also escaping me as well, but I think it's been over a year at least. So we did, leading up to the current benchmarks that we have, we had presentations from Lloyd showing what the data was showing in terms of where we were scoring. And so we adjusted the measures to essentially, if we were meeting that benchmark easily, we had raised it a little bit, to make it a little bit harder. The whole idea behind this is to be able to gather some data on projects outside of any of the funding processes to give us an idea how we're performing. These can definitely be amended. I'm gonna stop there and I'm gonna let Lloyd answer as well.
Thank you, Jonathan. Yeah, this committee recommended benchmarks, measures, as well as the benchmarks or goals for projects to achieve to the HSAC, and they were approved by the COC board, the HSAC, in March, I believe, of last year. HUD particularly does look at project performance of COC funded projects, and at least some years ago, HUD considered 20% of people in permanent supportive housing having employment or earned income as its standard. So that's one of the reasons we have kept the 20% benchmark for employment income for PSH participants. In making the benchmarks or goals, recommendations to the HSAC. There were some adjustments made based, as Jonathan said, on average performance of the various project types that are being reported. And
Well, and I think the other things too that we discussed, as I recall, particularly around, I mean, each type of housing project has their own, their own benchmarks, but particularly around, the income piece here, we know that not every person who's going to be in permanent supportive housing is going to be able to obtain, employment income. I mean, that's the dream, right? That a person could become fully self-sufficient and move out, opening up that spot for another person. So we do have measures like the second one, the not only increasing but maintaining whatever income they have so that they can keep that unit, they can keep that subsidy.
Yeah, and that was one of the reasons why I was asking this question, given the number of people who might not be as familiar, who are new to this committee, to know that this was actually established, by this committee and prior to us kind of reviewing this type of data. And so they understand sort of the context of it as it relates to the overall performance of the COC's various projects along the housing continuum.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too, every time, we look at data like this, I am, find myself reflecting on the question, what do we do with it? I realize that these are, snapshots in time. And I think the goal is ultimately to inform, I mean, yes, we want to adjust benchmarks from time to time, but to, ultimately inform recommendations for, what the COC can do better, or even to our, elected officials about things that can maybe be done that can affect some of those bigger issues. We constantly come back to the lack of support, lack of housing, right? So I find myself, when I look at this, what do we do with it going forward? Yes, we're talking about, we're going to publish it eventually, but what do we do with it as a committee? Any other comments or thoughts?
Just my opinion. I don't think we should just be a depository for the information. It should be used to kind of somewhat track the overall efficacy and performance of the COC's various projects, but also look at how it relates to not only maybe other systems, other communities that with comparable size of number of people who are dealing with chronic homelessness, but also in terms of, bigger and greater overarching indicators like socioeconomic indicators around employment, especially for individuals who may not have a high school diploma, or people who are battling physical, mental, and behavioral health disabilities. And so I think it's good information to share and understand. I just don't know whether or not it's the HSAC is, how we can use that to improve the overall systems. I think the city of Durham and Lloyd in particular are really helpful in terms of sharing information about upcoming job fairs and organizations that are hiring, which we share that with many of our members and participants of programs. However, we also are challenged with individuals who, don't always check email, don't always check voicemail, don't always receive text messages. And so communicating those opportunities also presents an obstacle and challenge for us to present that information to them, because we do realize, many of them have those challenges, but also gaining employment, gaining other means of even peer support, specialist certifications. Many of our participants have expressed an interest in that, but the motivation to kind of make those goals for themselves tend to often take longer to realize those goals. But, I think this is information. I think we should always keep a finger on the pulse of how we're doing overall. But, I think this is also a part of what the HSAC should be looking at as it relates to the other indicators across systems, COC systems, in terms of overall efficacy in permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, emergency shelters, and everything along the housing continuum.
Thank you, Tracy. Lloyd, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. I wanted to check in the minutes of the last meeting. There was an indication that the COC lead agency, the department, would be publishing the this performance information. Wanted to confirm, I guess, with the committee that the committee is ready to have the department publish them. As far as I know, Melissa could confirm it. I don't believe we've yet published the results of this latest performance reporting period.
That's correct. I believe we had discussion. We didn't really make a decision after our last meeting whether we would publish or not publish, because I think, we've continued to have issues with some of our providers submitting their data. And I know there were some people who felt like, let's just make it known to the providers that the next performance reporting, if they don't submit their data on time, we're just going to publish it and note that they did not submit their data, and that'll be listed publicly. And then there were others who were like, well, let's just go ahead and publish this time around. So I think that is something where we're hoping we can get a decision from the committee today as to whether to publish this round of performance reporting or not, and hold off until the next round.
Yes, and that I was going to bring up as well. So correct, in the minutes and in my review, rewatching the meeting, we did not make a firm decision one way or another about whether to go ahead and publish this round or wait to the next one. So I was planning on having a vote on that today. Before we do that, Melissa, you mentioned publishing, doing a report using the APR. So one question I now have is, would pulling an APR for the whole system change what we publish, or would we publish the APR and individual project performance like this?
That's a good question. I think it's important that we continue to show how each of our projects are performing. So I think what I was recommending is that the only thing that I would change would be that right now, the way we're currently reporting this portion of the system performance data, I've been calculating it based on the projects that have submitted data. But there are other projects, within rapid rehousing, within permanent supportive housing, that we haven't received data from. Transitional housing is another example where we haven't received the data. But we still, I think it's important that we still need to have some data from those projects that are missing. So I think what I'm recommending is that instead I could pull an APR for all of the projects. For all of the projects within that project type, and then that is what would be listed under system performance, rather than what I've currently been doing, which is only calculating the system performance based on the projects that have submitted data. So it's incomplete, basically, is what I'm saying. Right now, what we're using as system performance is incomplete because we're missing projects from those project types.
Okay. And Lloyd, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think some of the original vision for this process was that it was going to be semi-annual reporting of the individual performance of the various projects that are contributing to overall system performance. So that's, I think, something that I hope the committee would hold on to. I think, Melissa's suggestion about providing an overall system performance report based on an APR for that particular project type is certainly valuable, would provide fuller information to to the COC and to the community. I think reporting the performance of individual projects is important to the community, and I think the only way really to get individual projects to contribute their individual performance that I can see is if we begin to publish the individual performance and the community can see whether or not individual projects have submitted performance data, and then potentially donors and community members can let them know that we want to see their individual performance. So this is the second round, I think the second attempt to get projects to submit performance data, and it appears that some projects, some organizations perhaps that aren't necessarily getting continuum of care funds or ESG funds are not have not yet understood the value or the requirements that the continuum of care has for submitting performance data. We've asked them twice; they've not yet apparently submitted any data. I don't think anything's gonna change on that score until the committee and the HSAC let it be known that we are serious as a community about reporting performance data from all of our projects that are contributing to the overall performance of the continuum of care. HUD looks not only at performance of our POC funded projects, but how our system as a whole is performing relative to measures like the returns to homelessness, first-time homeless people, length of time people are experiencing homelessness, etc.
So it sounds like to me that the department's recommendation is to go ahead and publish this round, publish both an APR covering the whole system performance, which I completely agree with. I mean, I think it's hard to say how our system's performing based on the returns of incomplete returns of some of our projects. So it sounds like the recommendation is do an APR and go ahead and publish this round that has just been completed on the COC website.
That's certainly my recommendation, Jonathan.
Okay. All right.
Can I play devil's advocate just for a minute?
Absolutely.
In the event that, you know, and I think the aggregate data across the system is probably more useful for the public if they can kind of understand the different metrics that go into the performance measure and the APR. However, is publishing who we don't have, would they know who's missing or what organizations is missing in terms of making that public? And is that the punitive route or strategy we want to go with?
So I believe we discussed last meeting just the possibility of having like a bit of a disclaimer on the COC website about, you know, this doesn't include data from these organizations. And it sounds like, if I'm hearing you, that maybe feels a bit punitive.
I'm just asking a question because would they know who? I mean, the aggregate data would cover the system's performance overall in terms of all the different housing projects along the housing continuum. But would an individual who's not as familiar with the projects and how they fall in which category, would they necessarily know projects are missing, or would that be denoted in the information that's shared online? I'm just wondering how that information could be perceived. I know there is a need to want the information to be shared with the greater community, and I agree with that. However, I think it's a way in which you go about sharing that information that makes organizations who may not have received it, or they sent it and it may not have been captured the first or second round, to be shared with the greater community. Would that encourage them or discourage them to share information? It just seems I'm just throwing that question out there in terms for us to kind of talk about the perception of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question and a good comment. my gut says it probably comes down to wording. I mean, I certainly, from my own vantage point of chair, and I certainly don't want us to do anything that alienates people or alienates projects. But I would imagine there's got to be a way to communicate the data in a way. I'm certainly not a statistician, but don't data reports in general have like asterisks and things where they acknowledge we can't account for for this data from this particular group? Is there a way to do that that is respectful and not present a feel of a punitive feeling, so to speak? Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
A little bit torn. Some of our data isn't that great, but if we're measuring performance, at some point we do have to hold everybody accountable for meeting the standards. And if sharing the data publicly is a way to do that, and I can see how it can, make people not want to share, but at the end of the day, we have to measure performance. We have to do certain things as a system, and we have to perform at a certain level. And good or bad or indifferent, I think at some point we do have to hold everybody accountable for doing their part and following certain guidelines and protocol and requests. So I do think it's worth sharing. Should we share it tomorrow? Probably not. But I do think we need to get to that point very soon where we do share this information so that everybody can start participating and living up to their roles and responsibilities as part of the COC.
Yeah, thank you, Shantae. Yeah, I think we can do this. I think it's definitely a valid concern. We don't want to, sound punitive, but we are the performance management subcommittee. We do have obligations to the HSAC. I think it probably will just come down to wording. Even if we just say data is unavailable at this time from so and so. You go ahead, Tracy.
Yeah, and I threw that out there simply because I think as an agency, the city of Durham is probably very aware of how things are perceived online and information that is shared, and just wanted to throw that out for a discussion. However, I think in doing so, we don't have to disclose this, but I think it also should be documented if there have been approaches or strategies to obtain this information to no avail. I think just to say you don't have it and that, there were no attempts to, what I'm saying, in terms of documenting that. Is there a way to which we would have, if someone were to question, well, why wasn't this received? Or, when did notices go out? I think it needs to, the process in itself to obtain this type of information from individual providers and organizations needs to be documented. So in the event it is questioned, that we have that as a part of our rationale and reasoning with what we do have. We basically provided information we do have versus the information we did not have.
Totally agree with that level of transparency.
Okay, Melissa, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And I think that also, I know we had a conversation about this at our exec meeting for HSAC, that, I think we want to be more intentional about data as well. So rather than just, presenting raw data, I think we are hoping to lean more into conversations about what that data means. So I think that it would be smart that if we do post this, we go ahead and list that, you know, this report was approved to be publicly shared at so-and-so HSAC performance management meeting. And then that way, individuals who did want additional context for that data would be able to easily like find the link to the meeting where we actually discuss the data and go into more detail about the projects that did submit data and the attempts that were made to reach out to projects who did not submit data. Because we do have that conversation in this meeting, but someone who just pulls the report won't be able, you know, to see any of that. So having the larger context of the meeting, at least the meeting date, and having access to the link to the meeting from there, I think could be helpful with that.
On top of that, I'm thinking, you know, to Tracy's point, and it sounds like, I think, Melissa, you're also getting at this too, is we can provide where we publish the data on the website, a little bit about our process, when projects are invited to submit, you know, how long they have, and what is done, you know, like a follow-up, right? Because, you know, Melissa, you reach back out to some of these projects who didn't submit. So perhaps we can provide a little bit of information about the process, you know, that covers how it happens and what is done to try to obtain that data.
I think that's definitely doable.
Keeping us on track here, keep it in mind that we have a couple other agenda items today. What it sounds like and what I am going to suggest to the committee is that perhaps we take a vote today, and the vote, you know, could be, well, someone will have to make the motion, but based on what I've heard from Lloyd and Melissa, it sounds like the motion might be something along the lines to go ahead and publish this data of the individual projects along with the system APR. Is the committee ready to take a vote on that? In other words, does anybody want to make that motion?
Jonathan, I'll make the motion for us to publish that, given the contingency around, you know, documenting our process, and also in which we requested the information from various organizations to share this data, because I think that's important as a part of this.
Okay, so I'm gonna restate that motion. So Tracy has made a motion for us to approve the publishing of the individual project data and the APR, along with information about how the data was obtained. Did I get that correct?
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Do we have a second?
A second. This
Okay,
is
we have a
Angela.
second from Angela. Do we have any other discussion on this? Okay, so if we can go and vote in the chat box, I'm going to put in their motion to publish data. And you can vote yes, you can vote no, and you can abstain. Okay. Motion carries. Well, Community Development Department, you can go ahead and publish that data.
Thank you, everyone.
Right. Okay, moving us right along. Our next agenda item, we actually started talking about during the last meeting. We, as a performance management subcommittee, we have some things in the governance charter that we are tasked with doing. And so Lloyd reviewed with us during our last meeting the areas that we've really covered, and maybe one or two areas where we need some work. One of those areas is the implementation of evaluating the implementation of the written standards. And so when I sent out the email, I included those in there so that everybody would have a chance to read those, to get an idea what they are before we even revisit that topic. So before I give my thoughts on this, I want to turn this back over to Lloyd and see if he has any other comments he wants to make, continuing off from last meeting on this.
Thank you, Jonathan. I appreciate it. I really don't have any additional comments to make. It's a responsibility of the Performance Management Committee as outlined in the COC's governance charter that this committee should be evaluating implementation of the written standards across the COC. How the committee decides to do that is pretty much up to the committee at this point. At this time, I and the department don't have a specific recommendation as to how the committee might go about it. So interested, I think, at this point in receiving input from committee members.
Okay. Does anybody have any thoughts or comments having had a chance to read these standards? Okay. Well, I'm going to give my thoughts on this. So, our lead agency here, City of Durham, they have limited time and resources. We also, most of us, we have other, job responsibilities. So time and resources, I think, are, would be a challenge with this. And having read this over, I am wondering if there is any way that we might be able to do an evaluation using collected data from HMIS. We, in all things that we're doing, we emphasize, good data. If there is a way for us to do this evaluation using data, I think that might be more timely, more resource saving. And those are just my thoughts on that. Some of the questions, some of the things that that are on there are a little bit qualitative. So I don't know that all of it could be done that way. But if there is any way that a evaluation card could be created where we could do that, just pulling the data, I think that might be a possibility. Anybody else have any thoughts on this? Did we all have time to read these? Give it some thought. Do we need more time to give it some thought? And there is no rush on this. This is, I think this is just really a beginning conversation. Lloyd, you unmuted. Were you going to jump in?
Well, I was going to perhaps suggest that it can be a complex task, and the committee may want to try to perhaps appoint a subcommittee to develop a proposal for this full committee's consideration as to how the committee complete its responsibility. I think hopefully getting Daisha or Elliot or another representative of our HMIS lead agency at NCCH involved with the subcommittee could be valuable to get input as to how we might use data already being gathered in the HMIS to contribute to an evaluation could be helpful. So if somebody wanted to make a motion to appoint a subcommittee, we could move forward on that.
Maybe it might be helpful just to take one quick step back. With all the evaluating that we do for funding competitions, collecting data for the semi-annual reporting, perhaps you could kind of explain why of using these written standards to do an evaluation is important. You know, what is it about using these that is a little more that, you know, I don't know if it's exactly a HUD requirement, but why, you know, why would this be, you know, important given the other evaluations we already do?
So the COC's governance charter makes it a responsibility of the Performance Management Committee to evaluate how well the homeless service providers are implementing the written standards. Written standards are pretty all-encompassing, as people may have discovered as they reviewed them, in terms of how we as a COC expect our participating homeless service providers and partners to operate, both in terms of how they, you know, involve staff, how they train staff, how they recruit staff, and how they provide services to people experiencing homelessness, and how they provide assistance to people experiencing homelessness. So it's pretty broad area. As you mentioned, the written standards document at this point is again a pretty extensive, over 30 pages, that describe standards that we expect as a continuum of care, that we expect our community partners to abide by and implement. So I think it's certainly much broader than the performance information that projects have been providing through their, particularly through the HMIS, and the HMIS data particularly looks primarily at how projects are providing outcomes to the people being served, but does not necessarily look at how organizations have organized the work. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's some of the background that I would.
Okay, no, thank you.
Offer.
Okay. So I, as chair, am certainly happy to head up a subcommittee on this if the larger group wants to work on, you know, if there are others that want to work on this. Obviously it can't be a one-person subcommittee. Is there anybody else that is interested in working on this?
I am.
Okay.
I'm actually working on our manual for our agency, so this kind of falls right in line.
Okay, perfect. I think ideally it'd be great to have one other person, if somebody else would be interested on. Although I have two people could be a subcommittee.
Jonathan, this is Vega. I'll join Miss Addison on that project.
Okay. So what I would ask at this point is one of you could make a motion to form a subcommittee on this, and the other could second. And then that will get things started. And what I will do is, assuming this is voted on and approved, I will get back with you both on next steps.
Okay. So Vega Swepson, I would like to make a motion that we have a subcommittee currently with myself and Ms. Addison to address those comments and challenges and concerns.
Okay, excellent. Do we have a second?
A second.
All right, we have a second from Shantae. Any other discussion on this? Okay. All right, so what we have is a motion to create a subcommittee to basically come up with an evaluation plan for the written standards. And I'm going to put that in the chat box. If we'll go ahead and vote, committee members, if you will vote yes, no, or abstain. Okay. Motion carries. So we have a subcommittee on the implementation of written standards. And thank you, Shantae and Vega, for doing this. I will consult with the Community Development Department, and then I will get back with y'all, and we'll go from there.
Thank you.
All right. Last item on the agenda today is a Housing First evaluation for the 2024 COC competition. Obviously, we're still in the middle of 2023, but 2024 is around the corner. And one of the things that happened with this year's COC collective application is that there was a request for a Housing First evaluation to be part of that. And given that this group and volunteers had participated in the cross COC evaluation that was done earlier this year, we had an evaluation from that, as I understand correctly, that could be part of that application. So in thinking ahead to 2024, one of the things that we will need to think about is how we want to provide that Housing First evaluation information to be part of the collective application. So hopefully I have spoken of that correctly. I'm going to turn that over to Lloyd here and see if he wants to make any comments on that too.
Thank you, Jonathan. You've set the context really well. I'll share my screen and hopefully share some of the background for following up on this. What I had. Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet. Let me see. Up open. So I'm going to share. You've set the context pretty well, Jonathan. Basically, the how about now? See kind of a yellow.
There we go. Yeah.
All right. So this is a section of this year's notice of funding availability, and no, I just moved off of that particular section. Didn't intend to. Okay. This is the correct section. So and I'm reading this, COCs must describe what tools and methods are used outside of the local COC competition rating and ranking process to regularly evaluate and ensure that all projects that commit to following a housing first approach in their projects are maintaining fidelity to a housing first approach in project implementation, and COCs must attach an example of such an evaluation. So this is the first year, as I recall, that HUD required COCs to actually include an example of an evaluation, and we are including an example of the from the cross COC evaluation process that was used in the first quarter of 2023 to evaluate our projects. So the question becomes, as we look forward to 2024, what tools we may want to use. My overhead lights back on. What tools the committee may want to use to evaluate housing first implementation by our projects in 2024. The options would be essentially, I've kind of shared three potential options with Jonathan. One is to use the same tool we used last year, which is HUD Housing First Standards Assessment Tool. This is a tool that HUD has released in several iterations over the years. I think it was first released in about 2017. It is extensive. It's a little complicated. Committee members who have been involved with the committee may recall that we took questions from this tool and added it to the performance evaluation tool in 2019 through 2022, in which we simply asked, do the policies and procedures of the particular project say that they are doing this this kind of housing first implementation. So this is the example of that. Basically has the four components of housing first implementation: access and input, review of what it's say about leases, what they say about services and housing, and then some specific things, particularly around rapid rehousing services. The challenges of this tool are that hopefully you can see it, a portion of it on screen now. It says, does the project actually, do they say they do it? Perhaps in staff interviews, the policies and procedures document that they do it, and then do we have evidence that they actually do it? And so for each of these, say it, document, and do it, the three options are not at all, somewhat, and always. It is an extensive tool. Those of you who may have been involved with it in the evaluation earlier this year might have thoughts about that. So that would be one option. We could try to do that kind of evaluation of our projects in-house. The challenge is, as we talked about in preparing for the cross COC evaluation, was that we ordinarily would not want to involve the COC projects that are receiving COC funds because of a kind of a conflict of interest that they might have. So I looked briefly yesterday at a couple of other tools that might offer some options for us. And another option is to use this tool that is a bit simpler. It could be used just to conduct interviews with project staff. It is a series of questions. How, for example, how does the program determine the type of housing in which a participant will live? And then based on the information a staff member would provide to the interviewer would choose one of the 4 boxes that are listed here at the top. This survey goes down. For example, question 10 asks, what requirements do participants have to meet in order to stay in permanent housing? And this would be, again, some of the options that would be considered. And other examples are, which statement best describes the program actions regarding services when participants lose their housing? So this would kind of be a simpler evaluation tool. I mentioned to Jonathan in preparing for today's meetings that I think we could revise this tool for the committee's consideration and for the adaptation, and perhaps approve the use of this kind of tool in November or December of this year. I think whatever we do, we would with this tool, I think we'd want to do something to recruit volunteers not connected with any of our COC funded projects. A third approach that I looked at sharing with Jonathan, and get to the right screen. Apparently that screen has closed on me. Give me a moment to find it again, please.
Lloyd, while you're in search of that, just wanted to ask a quick question. Were the surveys that you came across or tools that you came across, things in which were considered like best practices to assess housing first? Practices within the, housing continuum?
Yeah, they all reference kind of housing first best practices and the basic components of housing first that are described in the project's answer in the eSNAPS application regarding low barrier to entry, as well as providing support services that and leases that don't require anything from clients beyond what would be required of a standard in a standard rental or lease agreement.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's probably a tool that needs to be user friendly across the system, but also, if it's actually getting at the crux of what we're trying to gather in terms of utilizing the housing first, not only philosophy but practice. So I was just wondering whether or not the assessments you came across were some of the latest in terms of best practices around assessing housing first, in working with either balance of state or COCs, or whether or not things that you found could possibly be adapted to be utilized within the Durham community.
Yeah, so thank you, Tracy. I think Adobe has chosen this time to update, so I'm not able to access that third document that I was going to. But I think the direction that I would request from the committee is that that we would plan to evaluate housing first without a cross COC evaluation in 2024, and that the committee would ask the department, the lead agency, to provide a draft of a recommended evaluation tool to use in the 2024 evaluation. I will say that at this point, my recommendation would be to go with something like that document I just shared with you that would be modified, rather than to use the say it, document it, do it evaluation tool that we used for the earlier evaluation this year. But either way, I think one of the challenges will be for the committee to recruit volunteers to be involved in this in the evaluation process that are not connected to any of the COC funded rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing projects. So the recommendation would be to for the committee to direct the department to propose an evaluation tool for housing first evaluation in 2024. To do that in October or November for the committee's consideration. I think the committee does have some time between now and the end of the year to finalize the evaluation tool that we use. Welcome, Renee.
Yeah, and having, of course, Lloyd, you and I traded emails with our thoughts here on this. I do understand the amount of resources it took to plan a cross COC evaluation, and remembering the feedback that we got, it seems like, that might be, a little much. I do like the idea of doing something internal, and yes, it will be, it's always a challenge to find folks who don't have conflicts of interest. But I do like that idea of trying to recruit a few volunteers to, well, let's call it a scoring panel, right? It's another version of a scoring panel, right? So I like that idea. And since, the lead department, you all as the lead agency, help put together that collaborative application, I do think that you all are probably in the best position to help design the card. So I think that makes a lot of sense to me as chair. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments? Okay. So, certainly as Lloyd said, we don't have to vote today, but we can if folks feel like they're ready to vote. Or if they want some time to think about it.
What are we voting on the process, the tool, or to move forward? Just remind me what we're voting on.
So we could, well, it would come down to what the motion would be. But I think the motion that I was hearing articulated would be a motion to direct the Community Development Department to design a housing first scoring tool, which would be used next year to do an evaluation. It sounds to me like maybe there would still need to be some details worked out. So one thing I'm wondering about is, how did we, in terms of the COC application this year, how did we pick which projects housing first evaluation, that was submitted, or did we submit multiple ones? So I'm guessing there's probably some more details to be worked out. So, it may just be as simple as directing the Community Development Department today to begin work on a tool with details to be worked out later.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Then I will make a motion for the committee to have the City of Durham Community Development Department.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a motion from Tracy to direct the Community Development Department to begin work on a housing first evaluation tool. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, a second from Renee. Any other comment or discussion on this? Okay, so let's vote in the chat box. I'm going to put in there motion to direct to begin work to design a housing first evaluation tool. So you can vote yes, no, or abstain. Okay. All right, motion carries. All right, so Lloyd, you and your staff can begin work on that tool. And I will also keep this item down to be revisited later because we're going to have to work out as a committee the details of who's going to implement that. Obviously, we have a lot of projects on this committee who have conflicts of interest. So we'll revisit that at a later date. That brings us to the end. Does anybody have any other concerns that they wish to bring up or announcements? Okay. Are we ready to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Renee to adjourn. Do we have a second?
I'd second.
Okay.
Angela.
Second from Angela Holmes. Thank you to everybody for another great meeting. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you at the bigger HSAC meeting.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
All right, and Shantae, I will be with you just a moment, so hang on.
Bye-bye.
Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone.